Dear audience, especially Universitas Terbuka students, wherever you are, we are in Coastal and Marine Areas Management MMPI5104 class today, and we will discuss about artisanal fisheries. So, I will explain you the biological and environmental data needs for artisanal fisheries management. It's important in modern fisheries management to take a multi-approach to a small-scale fisheries management. We need, for that, biological data, environmental data, socio-ecological data from social science, and medicine and public health. In this presentation, I will talk about biological data and environmental data exclusively. This is the fisheries system from the biological point of view. We have fish, we have the environment, and we have fisheries and other factors impacting on fish condition, fish health. Fish condition is important for growth, for the mortality, and for the reproduction of fish. These life history traits are important because they determine biomass and abundance of fish. And finally, this has a link to seafood security and seafood quality and safety. What type of biological data do we have to collect for this multi-approach? So first of all is fish abundance and biomass. How can we do that? We can do that by doing professional and recreational fishing surveys to compute catch per unit effort, CPUI. We can do also by being in the harbor and analyzing landings and commercial catch per unit effort. We can do underwater sensors for coastal fishes inhabiting, for example, coral reefs. And then we can also use fish catalogs and collections. When we move to offshore fisheries, we can also use research surveys to compute catch per unit effort. Another source of information is the traditional ecological knowledge. From this knowledge and from the as well as citizen science, we can collect the knowledge from the fishermen about the biological systems and attempt to use this data for biological purposes. Which biological parameters should at least be taken? First of all is fish growth. Secondly is fish condition, which can be measured through different ways, morphological simple condition indices based on weight and length of the fish, or more complex indices like liver weights and lipids in the tissues. Then we have fish reproduction. You can study the gonads through histological analysis, or you can do ichthyoplankton surveys to analyze the larvae of the fish. We can also track fish behavior through different methods like telemetry or underwater cameras. These biological parameters are important in modern fisheries management. Another parameter, biological parameter that needs to be taken into account is the vulnerability of the species. Not all the species have the same vulnerability to fishing. Some of them are more vulnerable than others. What determines the vulnerability of fish? First of all, growth. Second, the reproduction. And third, the lifespan. The high vulnerable species are those which have a slow growth, low reproductive potential, and a high lifespan. Then, as an additional measure of biological parameters, you can compute the bycatch. You can estimate the bycatch. Those species that appear in the catch accidentally sometimes are very vulnerable. For example, elasmobranchs, sharks, or sea turtles, etc. Okay, we have talked about biological data. Now we move to environmental data. What type of environmental data should we collect? First, habitat quality. It is important to determine essential fish habitats. The essential fish habitats are those habitats where fish benefit most for their condition, for their reproduction, for their growth, because are habitats that have special characteristics, special value. For example, coral reefs. Coral reefs are essential fish habitats for many coral reef species which are vulnerable. Then these essential fish habitats needs to be protected. They need to be protected through marine protected areas. Here I show you, for example, the network of marine protected areas in the Mediterranean. These marine protected areas cover different habitats, not only coral reefs in the Mediterranean, which is coral lesions assemblage. It's similar to coral reefs, but they cover also seagrass meadows, for example, or particular areas in the muddy bottoms where fish benefit the most from, because they have better food, more refuge, etc., for their biology. So these areas, it's very important that they need to be protected. Okay, what other type of environmental data we have to collect? This is climatological and oceanographic data. For example, through satellite data, oceanographic data through oceanographic stations, or climatic indices that you can easily find in the websites, from, for example, from NOAA in the United States. All these parameters are very important, finally, for stock assessment and stock modeling. This is what this is the final step. Which different kind of models we can use for estimating the state of the marine resources with the parameters I explained before. First of all, there is the classical population dynamic models, which is you need to compute fishing mortality, F, yield per recruit, or the biological reference points. So I just show you here an example of what is done in Europe, and we are establishing biological reference points for different species, different stocks, and the idea is that when you have the fisheries, you don't go beyond these biological reference points. If you go beyond these biological reference points, then you have trouble. Then the stocks become overexploited. Another possibility is to use ecosystem modeling. With this, not only fish stock data is taken into account, but the whole data from the whole ecosystem, including bycatch, environmental data, because this relies on the network of the trophic resources in the marine ecosystems. You have different models here to explore, and each of one has different complexity, and they are very timely when you want to see how one species from the ecosystem can impact to the other, which are the connections between the species and habitats. And the third one is the basic modeling. For small-scale fisheries, as you know, it's not easy to get data. It's a complex fisheries, so sometimes you cannot apply the models I said before, like population dynamics or ecosystem modeling. Then you go to very simple, basic models, and I will just show you very quickly the example of what we do in Cape Creus. It's a marine protected area where we have artisanal small-scale fisheries. So the idea with this basic data is to study the impact of small-scale fisheries on the marine resources, but on the other way, this data will provide biological information of what is the health status of the stock in the long term. So we are conducting different sampling in different habitats, different species, different years, and then with this we just compute very simple, basic parameters like catch per unit effort. We can see then, if you collect this data year after year, how, for example, for this species, the catch per unit effort is going down. This is bad. This is a symptom of overexploitation. Another thing that you can do is to compute the mean size of fish by month and year. If you have, as I show here, for example, a declining trend in the mean length, this is another bad sign that you probably are having overexploitation. Then you have the vulnerability of the species. You can compute for each species the vulnerability index easily found in fish base, intrinsic vulnerability of fish, and then you can raise this vulnerability of each species to the catch of each species and to compute the vulnerability of the catch by, for example, gear, and compare, that's what we have here, the vulnerability of the catch of different gears. Then you will see which gears are targeting more vulnerable species and which gears are targeting less vulnerable species. Of course, you can also use, as I show you here, the different categories of the IUCN red list, a least concern, near threatened, vulnerable, endangered, and critical endangered. And then you can simply try to match each species with one of the categories and to see by each gear how many species are endangered, how many species are vulnerable, and so on. Remember that there are, unfortunately, many vulnerable species that are taken by small-scale fisheries. Despite small-scale fisheries are good, are the best solution for the environment, much better than large-scale fisheries. Despite this, they are impacting on vulnerable species. For example, seahorse. And these seahorse are very vulnerable and are at risk of extinction. So, after studying, after evaluation, what is important also is to transfer the knowledge to fishermen. And this can do through particular publications directed to small-scale fishermen, like we did here in the marine protected area of Cap de Creus. You can do it by promoting special t-shirts where you can distribute with logos to the fishermen, or in different other ways. Finally, I just want to recall that there are many networks of small-scale fisheries around the world where you can share your knowledge as science or students to look, for example, Too Big to Ignore. It's a network of different researchers working on small-scale fisheries where you can have access to data and transfer of knowledge. Another one is the Low-Impact Fisheries of Europe. This one is exclusively focused on Europe, but you can take many information from there. And then there is the International Collective in Support of Fish Workers, because as you know, there is more than biology. Small-scale fisheries are important for the social system, particularly in the coastal communities, particularly in developing countries. So the social component needs to be embedded with a biological component, as well as the health of the fishers and the health of consumers. So, terima kasih, that's all, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Dear audience, thank you for your attention. See you in another program. We hope this program will increase your competence in the future. Keep studying hard and success.